It seems like such a long time since all this began. I'm just going to give you a moment to think about that and wonder what he means. Because that's the thing, right? I could mean since this pandemic began over a year ago. I could mean since this service began at 10:30 and you're wondering when it's going to be over. I could mean anything that's going on in the world right now, anything that's going on in your life. I could mean since it all began. It seems like such a very long time. And yet, every moment is a place of ending and beginning. It's not as simple as ends and begins. They overlap sometimes, or there's a space sometimes. Sometimes when you think something has ended, it really hasn't. Or when you think something's begun, maybe it hasn't yet. It can seem like such a long time. It can also seem like not enough. In fact, as we come to an ending, it often does feel like it's not been enough. Imagine being one of the disciples. You've been on this journey with Jesus. When did it begin for you? Did it begin when Jesus called you? Probably for you. For us, the story begins much earlier. There's the whole incarnation story. Actually, it begins much earlier than that, because there's all the stories that lead to that moment. And then there's the story of the beginning. And of course, the sense of wonder of what was before the beginning. But for the disciples, maybe it began when Jesus called them. I wonder how many times they thought it ended. The moment would have been different for all of them too, by the way. I'm sure Judas thought it ended a lot earlier than the others. But they most certainly would have thought it was over when Jesus was arrested or when Jesus was dead. But then he wasn't. In fact, not only wasn't he seemed to be hanging around. And after about a month or so, in fact, in the story, it's 40 days, and after about a month or so, you'd be thinking, well, maybe he's going to stay now. Nope. He leaves. But he doesn't go back to the tomb. He doesn't die again. He's raised up to heaven. He simply goes. And the disciples stood there wondering with amazement about how this was happening. Sure, now it kind of sounds like a Monty Python sketch, raised up on a cloud. Or, I don't know if you remember, on Easter Day, we had an awesome little video where kids tell the Easter story, but it's not just the story of Easter, it's the whole story. And they get to the ascension part, and there's Jesus, and he's got a cloud around us, and he's going like this. I know it sounds like that, but imagine in the moment, one of the disciples, and Jesus simply is gone. Now what? Well, he said the Holy Spirit was coming, but not yet. We should wait in Jerusalem for the Holy Spirit. But then the Holy Spirit does, wait, hang on, we're not there yet. Pentecost is next week. Hold on. I know we want to get to Pentecost because it's exciting. It's got wind and fire and stuff and tongues and things. But we're not there yet. It's kind of like there's pieces to this, isn't it? In fact, let's just, in this moment, we'll start with today, or actually, according to the church calendar, last Thursday was Ascension Day. Jesus leaves. The Holy Spirit arrives, right? Ascension. Ascension is the conclusion of the season of Easter. Pentecost. And then we have this on the church calendar, we call it the season, either the season of Pentecost or the season of ordinary time. I call it the let's get some business done time, because that's what happens. Jesus leaves, the Holy Spirit comes, the disciples go out and do stuff. They're witnesses. They begin the work of creating communities around the story of Jesus. Nope. They begin the work of creating communities around the love, which is the life of Jesus. It'd be really easy to break it down on like we do on the calendar. Hang on a second. There's a space between Ascension and Pentecost. There's 10 days, in fact. 10 days in which the disciples had to be patient and hang out in Jerusalem waiting for the Holy Spirit, which they didn't know was coming 10 days later. They just had to be patient and wait around for it. So what do? Well, they elected a 12th apostle, right? We needed 12. Jesus had 12. We need 12. We better have a 12th. Let's elect somebody. And they elect Matthias, who either has the unique distinction of being the one who was elected by the people to replace Judas, who was chosen by Jesus, or he's the first to be chosen in the spirit of Jesus. The 11 were chosen by Jesus, but in choosing that 12th, they knew they had to choose someone in the spirit of Jesus. Someone who would be part of the witness to all that they had witnessed. That's why they had to choose somebody who'd been there since the beginning, since they were all called. Which kind of makes you wonder, how many more were there like Matthias or Justus who didn't get elected? There was lots. I wonder when the story began for them. Something else happened in there too. Jesus leaves. Spirit arrives. 10-day space where what? Does that mean no Jesus, no Spirit, no nothing? Well, of course not. They prayed. They knew the relationship with God, the relationship with Jesus was still there. Whether they recognized an ending and a beginning, whether they even saw it that way, they knew they were not alone. It's very easy sometimes when we're trying to deal with things ending and things beginning, or not knowing, to feel like we're alone. And yet, the disciples, who very definitely would have had the experience of being alone when they thought Jesus was dead, now find themselves connected to God, connected to Jesus, connected to everything. Part of that circle of beginnings and endings and endings and beginnings. It can feel like a very long time. And perhaps in the big picture, it is. But it's also moments. Constant moments of endings and beginnings and beginnings and endings. Because all of those, the experience of those endings carry us into the next beginning. Jesus wasn't gone. And sure, I'm going to leave you now, but don't worry, the Spirit is coming. But he hadn't really left. The physical Jesus had. The physical Jesus of the incarnation had. But the Spirit of Jesus was still, that spirit of love and grace and compassion that the disciples had discovered from their experience with Jesus is in them as well. That sense of the divine and human that Jesus showed them, that they experienced with Jesus, was in them too, and is in us. In all our experiences of endings and beginnings and endings, I feel obligated to say it that way now. Endings and beginnings and beginnings and endings. Because it's not just about endings and beginnings, it's about beginnings and endings. You see what I mean? It's one continuous movement, one flow. We can compartmentalize these things. We can break them down like we do on the calendar. Ascension, Pentecost, getting out and doing the work. And it's helpful to take a moment sometimes to observe those things, to set aside a time to observe those things, but they're all things that are part of the continuous life that we live and have lived and are living. We are experiencing new endings and new beginnings every day, in every moment. God is with us. Jesus shows us how to live not only through those moments, but into those moments. It's through those moments, in fact, that we know we are alive. And have been since the beginning, and will be to the end, and the beginning, and the end, and the beginning. God is with us from the beginning.